welcome back to the Israel Connection. I'm Esti Zenati, and my guest today is Jay Shofet. Jay is a seasonal environmental activist with a rich background in social change and global environmental resource development. With over a decade at the Society of the Protection of Nature in Israel, or SPNI for short, or Chevra Laganat HaTeva in Hebrew. He brings a unique perspective on environmental conservation and Israel's ecological landscape. Originally from upstate New York, Jay moved to Israel in 1986 and has become a recognizable figure in the world of environmental advocacy, building international partnerships and driving sustainable initiatives. Hi, Jay. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much, Esti.
So to those who haven't heard of SPNI, what can you tell us about the organization and what's the main mission?
SPNI, Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, is Israel's oldest, largest, and leading environmental NGO or non-governmental organization. We were founded in 1953, so we're over 70 years old. One of the older environmental organizations in the Western world, honestly. We were founded by a group of kibbutznikim and scientists at the time who properly predicted that the draining of the Hula wetlands, it was a Hula lake at the time, was going to be ecological folly and an environmental disaster for Israel. And they were right. The protests failed, and Israel and the Jewish National Fund, the state and the National Fund drained that wetland. But upon that protest, SPNI was born, and our main mission was to preserve and protect Israel's nature and biodiversity. And we do that through direct action in all kinds of ways, lobbying and land use planning and science and citizen science, but we also do it through education, formal and informal, and through fostering a love of nature, through advancing trail hiking and just being in nature. So.
Yeah, as someone who grew up in Israel, I know when we went on school trips, field trips, everything, all the guides and everything was Chevra Laganat HaTeva. That's
right,
what it was. And all the parks and everything has their logo. And we know they're keeping that place safe.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I mean, and the school trips are really part of our bread and butter. We're an organization that actually brings in 2/3 of our income on people who, on services that we provide for the government and for the school system and educational chaylut chinuchit, as we call it. But also just hikers and people staying in our field schools. We have these hostels out in nature, and every given month we have 30, 40, 50 programs, guided hikes, sky gazing, stuff that families do. Yeah, we're a very popular brand in Israel, and unfortunately not as well known abroad.
Well, that's why we're doing this, so people can know more about it.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah. Because I think the work that you guys do in Israel is very important. And I mean, I've known of Chevra Laganat HaTeva my whole life, but it's time people outside of Israel know about it and know the importance of it as well.
Thank you. And it's true, I don't want to depress you, but one of the things we're doing now and having to do is advocate for this educational school trips. When just a few years ago, every kid from about 4th grade through 12th grade would do a 3 or 4 day overnight trip, 1 or 2 a year. And they've, with starting in COVID and now with the war, that whole, the plans got screwed up, but also the budgets got cut. And so we think it's very, very important for school kids to get out there in nature.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed throughout the years, unfortunately.
And you noticed, yes.
Yeah. So can you share a specific moment in nature, maybe from childhood, that shaped your worldview and commitment to protect the environment?
Well, that's really interesting. I would say, apropos trail hiking, I grew up in the Berkshire Mountains, I grew up in upstate New York. We're right on the edge of Massachusetts, and hiking in the Berkshires, the Appalachian Trail, Mount Greylock, and Pittsfield. Those are the places I think that inspired my awe of the natural world and my desire to always be active and fight for it, preserve it, and that's grown.
When did you join SPNI?
I've been in SPNI, employed by SPNI for 11 years now. And before that, I directed an environmental foundation. That's a consortium of foundations that pool their resources to support the environment in Israel.
So what is one SPNI project that you're especially proud of, and what kind of impact has it had?
I'll give you two, if I may.
Yes.
I mean, and the most important, and I just sort of mentioned it, our sort of overall term for it is nature heals. But we are out there to get as many Israelis out to nature for as long as possible, everybody, as much as possible, because it turns out it's scientifically proven. It's not just anecdotally nice to be in nature. It actually reduces symptoms of stress, anxiety, depression. It lowers serotonin, lowers cortisol, and raises dopamine and serotonin in your brain. And we have really looked at this. You know, in America, there are 35 states where family physicians can write prescriptions for free entry into state parks as part of a health program and a mental health program for people. And Israel is a nation in trauma. I mean, there's a true mental health crisis in Israel now. It has been since October 7th. I mean,
before even.
Well, I was going to say, if kids who were 20 years old who grew up in Otef Aza, in the Gaza environs, they've been hearing sirens and running to shelters their whole lives, you know, occasionally. So they were PTSD on October 8th. You're exactly right, October 7th. And so on October 8th, when, you know, 1,200 people were killed and 200 people were taken hostage and so many people were wounded and the war began and so many people were made homeless right away. Yeah. And then the north, that happened as well. You know, 70,000 people from the south and 90,000 people from the north are suddenly in hotels spread all around the country. The mental health crisis was declared already, like by October, November. The director of public health and the Ministry of Health was making a plea for non-conventional solutions to this crisis because Israel's already was facing a shortage of mental health professionals. Right. So, you know, we came to the fore with, well, we're going to take kids out to nature. It's not a therapeutic thing. You know, nature heals. Ecotherapy is another way to look at it. It's not like talking to your psychologist while you're in nature. It's being in nature, and maybe there's and you're absorbing the senses around you. And if you're talking to somebody, it might be a dmut chinuchit. It might be an educator. And wilderness education and that whole field now is something that we've been studying, and it's being studied more and more. We developed our flagship program that I guess I'm most proud of, and we're raising funds for it now, and we want to keep it going and increase it because the trauma's, you know, so many people were displaced and traumatized. The war's been going on. 350,000 reservists were called up. Many have been, you know, 100, 200, 300 days, 400 days in reserve duty. Their families, all that disruption. Trauma is just increasing. Then there was, you know, what Modi, I think the comedian, calls the Babushka War, the war inside the war, 12-day Iran war, where another 40,000 people became homeless, mostly in Tel Aviv and Ramat Gan and Rishon. I mean, you know, it's really, everything's a trauma. And so we developed for teens in particular who have been displaced, living in crowded conditions. Their organic classrooms were broken up. We bring them back in organic classrooms, but now we're doing it for everybody. And we're taking them on these 4 days resilience journeys, Masot Chosen, where we develop these programs where there's many principles involved, but they actively participate. They take on responsibilities. We teach them survival skills, and we sort of test them a little bit, foraging, building a fire, pitching a tent, and it gets increasingly more challenging for them. And there's talks on a regular basis, mornings and evenings. There's people talk about what's going on, and it's all through this lens of I don't know if you're familiar with it in the States yet, but in Israel, it's a kind of a field we've been involved in for a while, doku activism, the concept where every teenager is like a filmmaker. Yeah. And so, of course, they give up their phones for this 4-day trip in nature, but every day there are 2 or 3 of them have cameras where they're in charge with filming. You know, other kids have to make the meals and you know, do stuff that actually, if they didn't do it, people wouldn't eat. But these kids, every day, a couple of 3 kids have to film something beautiful, something challenging, people helping, conflicts, nature, this, that, whatever. And then they're edited into this incredible 45-minute or 15-minute film that's like, instead of getting an album of 9,000 photos that everybody uploads
Right.
to, so they have this documentary document of their trip. So that's one. And the other thing I'll just say briefly, and I alluded to this before, we were founded on the protest of draining the swamps, and we are now in this very densely populated and semi-arid country. We are rewilding Israel's lost wetlands. We've latched on a method scientifically and economically to take a lot of the wetlands. We want to get to 25 or 30% of the lost. 95% of the wetlands that existed in Israel 100 years ago no longer exist.
Right.
They've been drained, paved over, lost to climate change and development. But about 30% of that land, they built fish farms. The kibbutzim, it's been a mainstay of kibbutz agriculture for a long time, growing fish in these increasingly intensive agricultural conditions on these wetlands that were kind of redirected into like bathtub-like structures to grow carp and tilapia and other kind of stuff like that. And that's becoming less and less profitable these days because of the global markets. And so instead of paving over these wetlands and building whatever, including solar panels, we are leasing them from the kibbutzim and turning them back into nature, into wetlands. And we thought of this idea 5 years ago, and it's already become like a real important tool in the conservation toolkit of the Israeli nature conservation community, the government ministries, the Nature and Parks Authority. So very proud of both of those projects.
Well, so speaking about the one you mentioned before, the therapy, I think we see a lot of different like unconventional therapy ways of like connecting people to nature in one way or another, whether it's through therapy with animals, like horses, or whether it's, I've seen something on the news, on Israeli news, that this guy came up with a way to deal with his trauma. He was in the military and his father got killed, like the whole thing, and then to take reservists that suffer from PTSD, and they make wine together. He has a winery.
Wow.
So that is pretty cool. And I think and he takes groups, like once in a while he would take a whole group, and they have I think it's like a month-long or something like that project, and they make their own wine, they make their own labels based on their story. Like, it's really cool. So,
that is very cool.
Yeah. And I think in general, just being in nature, for me personally, being near water, I love being near water. I think that's very calming.
There's a book called Blue Mind, written by marine biologists in California, which shows why humans like to be on, near, under, in water. And how an apartment building facing the water, you can get twice the rent than the same apartment not facing the water. Well, we grew up in the amniotic fluid in the womb, and that's my theory.
Yeah.
Originally amniotic.
So we mentioned, of course, October 7th. What impact did the events of October 7th, and particularly the fires that came afterwards in the South and in the North, had on Israeli nature and wildlife? And what has SPNI been doing to respond or help restore affected areas?
Well, if you asked for one project, I gave you two. If I'd given you three, this is what I would have talked about.
Okay.
First of all, the fires they damaged a lot of natural area in the north, and not so much the south. The Hezbollah rockets did a lot of damage. Also, the nature in the north is, let's just say, more complex than in the south, and the topography is much more complex. But the fires are sort of the least of the problems. For one thing, Israel is unfortunately very used to forest fires and fires burning in open areas. Happens every fall after 6 or 8 months of absolutely no rain and careless hikers or whatever. They've almost have never proved actual arson, but it's almost always human causes.
Unfortunately.
And burning garbage or whatever, and it's been terrible over the last several years. It's really an issue, and so the fires made it. The Hezbollah rockets over the last, it ended by last September, but for a good year plus, it was an issue. But the bigger issue really was not that. It's It's the footprint of the Israeli army, the staging areas that it needed to fight in Lebanon and in Gaza. And I'm talking about, I have pictures of this, and we did a SIUR up north. The northern border of Israel for like 10 to 15 kilometers was closed for over a year and a half. We couldn't even get there to see what was going on. But whole valleys that used to be pristine valleys in the Upper Galilee, like tens of thousands of soldiers just sat there for a year. So when they left, not just tank marks, but whole areas have been like cleared of vegetation and human waste. They were digging, latrines, and it was just, a lot of old equipment is kind of left around. And in order to maneuver up there, they blazed trails through the woods and through nature reserves. It was security. Nobody's making it, they did what they had to do. But when you need to move heavy trucks and tanks through wooded, hilly area, that's a lot of natural damage, and that happened. So, and the communities, of course, many of the kibbutzim and Metula and Kiryat Shmona have a lot of damaged buildings, and people haven't come back entirely yet. But even the community, but because of that, and maybe 70% of the people in that northern line have come back. Because of that, a lot of businesses aren't open. It's hard to get people to staff. So we are working on. Yes, we're concentrating on the ecological restoration of both of those areas and working with the government authorities, both in the north, Tnufa, in the south, Tkuma, these government authorities with a lot of money and budgets to look at both the economic, the social, and the environmental and the infrastructure needs of these areas. And we are there very active in the north, especially through the joint. We were kind of contracted by them to present the government with a plan on how this ecological restoration is supposed to work. And, we're talking about the fires again. We're used to fires, and after, especially forests, especially those that had those non-native European pine trees planted on them, the best thing to do after fire is absolutely nothing. For a year, for sure, to do nothing. Just observe what's going on. Forest fires happen in nature, and that's how forests regenerate, especially pine forests. So that is less problematic. But these areas, the nature that was damaged by roads that don't need to be there anymore, and by staging areas that are just big, sort of like gashes in the land that don't need to be there anymore, that's the more tougher ecological stuff. But the most important thing is the communities and integrating, like making sure that nature is accessible. People move to the north and to the Gaza area because of the nature, the Roma Dome and the flowers in the south.
Right.
And, if you like flowing water and green, so there's just a very small area of Israel for a very few months of the year where you can get it. But
it's beautiful over there.
Galil is very, the piece called Little Switzerland. That's an exaggeration, but it's green and flowing usually. We've had 7 years of drought now. The rivers are barely flowing, but we're working hard to get water back to nature as well. Now that we desalinate water more per capita than any country in the world, the water authorities are allowing us to release water into nature. It's one of the reasons we can rewild these wetlands, because the water authorities are letting us divert this water instead of to agriculture, to just nature, which is an incredible sort of beginning of a paradigm change in Israel.
What about the fires that happened in Jerusalem afterwards? Did that impact
area? Yeah, no. That's also happens all the time as well. I think those fires were not caused by missiles or rockets or anything.
No.
They're just the seasonal fires that take down. By California standards, they're not big, but by Israeli standards, 1,000 acres here and there is a lot.
Yeah. In your view, what do you think is the most urgent environmental issues facing Israel right now? And do you think we're addressing it seriously enough?
The biggest environmental issue facing Israel and the globe is climate change. And Israel, like the rest of the globe, is not addressing it well at all. And Israel now is, just like the States, has begun to pull out of or not really enforce its own climate regulation. And we have actually, in terms of mitigation, the Western world, Germany, on a sunny day produces the vast majority of its energy from renewable sources. And, they have 150 sunny days a year. We have, in some parts of Israel, 358 days of sun a year. And our goals are low and we're not reaching them. Today, we have maybe 12% of our energy is produced through renewable sources. And we have to do a much better job. But that, of course, Israel's not going to move the needle on climate change for the globe. But I think morally and practically, we have to do our part. But also, we are part of the globe that's going to be affected more than anybody else. We're already hot and we're getting hotter at a faster pace and drier and weirder. Like we've had a drought, but the last 7 years, truly, it's just very biblical. But we had 7 years of drought, and even in those years where we had the rain we had, it wasn't spread out over the winter. It came in like 4 days. Just these crazy cloud bursts. It's Thomas Friedman called it years ago, and it's so true. It's not global warming; it's global weirding. Storms get more intense, droughts get more intense, storms get more intense, fires get more intense, cold gets more intense. It's really,
the weather seems like it's been going crazy the past.
It's been going crazy, and people feel it. Right now, today we had a conference on river communities. Like we're organizing people around there's technically 7 rivers in Israel. Rivers, we call them.
Yeah.
In America, it's maybe a stream. Most of them are creeks, but let's just call it a stream to be.
Yeah.
And some of them are barely flowing, and so we're galvanizing the public to, kind of protect them at the local level. A lot of environmental activism starts at a local level, and a lot of people get into political activism through an environmental issue in their local community.
So how does SPNI manage the tension between Israel's fast-paced development? Because we know buildings are going up in Israel every single day, and the need to protect the open spaces and biodiversity. That's
a great question, and the answer is, we ask about like our greatest successes. In some ways, our CEO Dan Alon likes to say that our greatest success, let's say historically, was to really insist on having a betting on land use planning as a way to preserve the environment, because Bill Clinton said in his 92 election, it's about the economy, stupid. In Israel, it's all about land use planning. In other words, the government owns 85% of the land. Kakal owns most of the rest of it, but it's both those bodies lease it out to cities, to developers, to sometimes it statutorily becomes a nature reserve or whatever, but it's how you divide, whether or agriculture or industry, and how you divide that land up. And so we passed a law, we advanced a law in 2004 where the public, through us, basically, because we're the biggest and most professional, has a say on all the statutory planning committees in Israel that are on the local, regional, and national levels for infrastructure, housing, etc. And we make sure that there's environmental standards. We're fighting the current government, which is trying to bypass environmental standards, and we constantly mitigate plans that would harm nature and advance plans that are more sustainable. And so when you ask how we do it with all this development, dense, sustainable cities is the answer. Israel, we have to build up, and even I was seeing it recently. I was in the Golan Heights in a Druze village. I went with my friends over a few days last week, and in these villages of 7,000 people now, a lot of the Arab villages, but also the Jewish villages, are kind of hemmed in. They don't have much room to grow, and so they got to grow up because it's not natural in the Arab communities. But Israel seems to have adapted to it. I don't know if you've seen Tel Aviv lately, but we have skyscrapers that are 80 stories. So one is going up to 90 stories. So Tel Aviv is a city of 400,000 people. It has more skyscrapers per capita than any city of that size. And there are many cities in Israel that are building that way, that are smartly managed. Like in America, the big cities have a more environmental consciousness by and large than the government does.
Yeah, I know, like growing up in Rehovot, and my whole family's in Rehovot, and over there, when I was little, and even before then, we used to have a lot of orchard. We used to have a lot of, orange trees and lemon trees, and they had to, unfortunately, they got rid of a lot of them. But now I see in the past few years, they've been building tall buildings, a lot of tall buildings, rather than just houses.
Right, because it's so much more energy efficient. it's just crucial. You can't put, it's just like public transportation. I'm sure you'll see the graphics of 50 people traveling in one bus and 50 people traveling in 50 cars. It's just, and public transportation is another way that we have to do right. I mean, there's a lot of important environmental principles involved in the headline dense, sustainable cities, but it all does start with the planning of cities to be dense and not, because typically the way cities are built, Beersheba is just like a classic example of this. I don't know how familiar you are, but Beersheba, when it was whatever, historic, Abraham had his tent there, whatever, but when the state was created, there was this old city, like Jerusalem has an old city and Rome has an old city. I mean, these are nice places, it could be not that great now, but they're, but every mayor of Beersheba, every development was, let's build further away from this old junky city. And so like the nicest neighborhoods of Beersheba are like miles from the place that eventually got developed into sort of a downtown. So it's, it's counterintuitive to the way a city should grow with a city center or a town center. And then it didn't happen that way.
I feel like they did a similar thing in Ashdod, I think. They started building outside and then coming inside. And now, they're building more inside of the...
That's exactly right. Yes. Yes, they built a huge... Ashdod has the problem of a bad grid. It's just that it has this grid of streets that are like huge.
Yeah.
There's no walk. Like everybody needs a car in Ashdod to go anywhere. Right.
Yeah, it's a big city, and I don't think people realize that, because I think most people outside of Israelis, I don't think they know Ashdod very well unless they go to the beach. Yeah, but
Ashdod, Ashkelon, Netanya, these have all become cities. Rehovot, Rishon, they're all cities of like 150, 200,000 people now. I mean,
yeah, Ashdod is huge. Like my mom, my grandmother, they live in Ashdod, and every time I go visit, it's like new buildings everywhere. It's crazy, and they get taller and taller every year.
Totally.
Yeah. So how do you see environmentalism fitting into Israel's national identity?
It's a good question. Wow, it's like I want to say, and I could say, and I do say when I talk to Jewish groups about how there's a biblical call for environmental stewardship, wise environment, and today in Israel, and Tsar Balei Chaim, treating your farm animals well, and leaving land fallow, and Shemitah year, and not planting crops, and it's true. As an agrarian society, the Jews were very attuned to the natural cycle of the seasons and the crops and stuff like that. And it is also true that in many ways, at the beginning of Zionism, pre-state and into the state, in some ways, kind of the high priests of Zionism were the Morei Derech, and to get up and walk the land, and to own the land and to discover the land was a high goal and an aspiration in the early years of the state. And today, for example, the Israel National Trail, which by the way has been called by National Geographic one of the 20 iconic trails of the world, goes from the Hermon to Eilat, 1,100 kilometers. Mm-hmm. It is still quite a popular rite of passage for kids before they go in the army, after they get out of the army, after university, families on bar mitzvahs. But to hike the whole thing, which is a minimum of 3 weeks a month, I mean, that it happens. It's still a big rite of passage in Israel.
So you've worked in environmental advocacy for years, and do you ever feel discouraged, or what keeps you going, despite all the challenges?
I do feel discouraged a lot. I mean, I feel like there's like, in one way, there's two kinds of people in the world. There's those that cannot believe that we're not doing anything about climate change, and then there's everybody else that's like, what? That's not even a big issue. It's hard to. I mean, the psychology around climate change, I think, is a fascinating issue. But yeah, it's discouraging. The countries that are not even advancing environmental policies, but are repealing environmental policies that we thought we'd settled a while ago. And I guess what's really discouraging in Israel, and I was going to mention this before, it's just there's such a crowded public agenda in Israel. Mm-hmm. I mean, to get past the war and the hostages and the ultra-Orthodox, and are they serving or not, and 40 million other, and Bibi's trial, and I mean, the housing crisis, and
Yeah, there's a lot going
cost
on.
of living crisis, and I mean the environment. It's like tough to get anybody's attention on it. Or our spokesperson, for example, our PR department is always
Mhm.
complaining about that.
It's tough. I mean, when you have all these things that are, I guess, they're more visible to others,
They're
and
more urgent. They're more
more
urgent.
urgent, I mean, they're more people can, they know it touches them personally. I feel like
Right. Right.
more
But
than
so does, a polluted, air pollution and not having accessible nature and
yeah.
beaches that are, gross or not accessible. I mean, that those are all things that affect people as well, but somehow, you know,
I feel like it's one of those things that until something really bad happens, then you start noticing it more. But until
right,
then, everything else takes priority over that.
right.
Yeah. What is your favorite natural spot in Israel, and what makes it so special to you personally?
Oh, wow. Maybe I'll just go with Ein Gedi Springs, Nachal, Wadi David,
Oh,
Nachal David at Ein Gedi. I mean, first of all, it's very special because it's very accessible.
mhm.
It's actually technically accessible by wheelchair, not up to the top of the springs themselves, but I don't know if you remember the Ein Gedi Nature Reserve, which I think is the most. No, I think the Hula is the first, and the Ein Gedi is the second most visited nature reserve in Israel. But it's a beautiful, not strenuous hike up the sort of towards the cliff, and there's a series of waterfalls, and the top waterfall is just very, very special.
I know they have their water that they sell, and it's the best. I think they're one of the best water.
Yeah, well, we're not in favor of that, but
No, I know. Well, I know, but it's good. But it is a good place. It's a beautiful place to see and to be in.
yeah,
Um,
it's funny. I mean, you hear a lot. You could be wowed by Israeli nature, or you could be like, okay, but as my aunt would say every time, this looks just like Sedona. What's the big deal? I saw this in Sedona. Like, okay, so you saw it in Sedona, but it's here too. And
right.
and the north, okay, if you're looking for green and waterfalls, I mean, we don't have Niagara,
Right.
but it's beautiful. It's there's the Galilee is green, and the Dome, the poppies and
Mhm.
anemones blooming in the south. There's some very we produce a nature calendar every year. I'll make sure you have one that shows. But lately we're focusing more on wildlife, but there's incredible wildlife in Israel. I mean, what I should have said, the main thing that's so important about what we do, and nature in Israel, is that Israel is part of less than 3% of the globe declared a global biodiversity hotspot, meaning
Mhm.
that we have more species of plants and animals per square kilometer than 97% of the globe. And that is because we are situated at the intersection of three continents. So we have mixing in Israel the southernmost species of Europe, the northernmost species of Africa, and the westernmost species of Asia.
Right.
Both plants and animals, all existing in Israel, which has the topography and climates from, you literally in January could go skiing in the Hermon, and 6 hours later by car be in a lot, and be scuba diving in 100-degree weather. So it's for the size of New Jersey, it's a very, very diverse country, and that makes the nature very, very diverse.
Right. And we also have a lot of hidden places that not a lot of people know about, which I
Well,
think I've
yeah,
seen some places everywhere. Like there's this guy on social media that he goes, like, he finds those little
I,
places in
I,
Israel,
yes, I
like
heard that.
gorgeous places that you would think it's somewhere in Europe or
Right, and my daughter lives on a kibbutz up north. She was one of the evacuees they just moved back a month ago after October 7th, and their kibbutz has not just one but two. One is like Agama Ne'elam, like
Mhm.
the lost pond, and the other one is like Gana Nistar, like this secret pond, like these two little watering holes, like
Yeah.
right off the edge of the kibbutz that theoretically you're not supposed to know about, but
Yeah, there was some cove. I think it was, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was up north somewhere, like a cove that you go in and then you see the blue water, like really beautiful place. I don't know
Well, that
exactly
sounds like
where.
Rosh Hashanah, but
I don't know. Maybe.
or maybe just south of it. I hope that's it, or
Yeah.
yeah, Hope
Yeah, if
Dor.
I find it, I'll let you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, if you could pass one national law tomorrow to protect Israel's environment, what would it be?
Um, Well, that's a great question. I mean, I would say the most urgent environmental law that needs to be passed in Israel is a better climate law.
Mhm.
We just need much more regulatory action in creating more aspirational goals for renewable energy, and the laws, like for example, on rooftops and agricultural buildings and all that stuff, it needs to be more incentivized and more mandated. I think that's the most urgent environmental issue. But in terms of nature conservation in a more narrow sense,
Mhm.
I mean, well, there's so many things. One of them might be just to reinstate the law that when Tommy Zandberg was Minister of Environment in the previous government, the last time Bibi was not Prime Minister a couple of years ago, they passed a zero additional risk law for the Red Sea, for the Gulf of Aden, because ever since the Abraham Accords, we've been transporting on a very small scale UAE oil to Europe. Israel's become like a fossil fuel exporter, or transfer point, which is even worse. But this current government wants to really expand the facilities of that port to take huge oil tankers, offload the oil onto trains or pipelines, take it to the Mediterranean Sea and export it. This whole thing is such a crazy idea. And most importantly, the coral in the Red Sea, the coral reefs in Eilat are the northernmost, healthiest coral reefs in the world. Scientists come around the world to study them. They're studying how they regenerate them. An oil spill would be hugely, hugely disastrous for not just the corals, but probably the tourism industry in Eilat and, everything. So passing a law to stop that would be.
Yeah. So before we go, last question: what kind of world do you hope future generations in Israel will inherit, and what will it take us to get there?
That sounds like a political question, but
No, not political. I think just like personally, what do you hope the grandchildren will have when they grow up?
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. They live in the finger of the Galilee, as we call it, and that area. I've seen it I've been in Israel 40 years, and I can remember when it was much more green and flowing than it is now. But Israel will be a green beacon to the world with fresh air. The air pollution in Haifa will be gone. Rivers will be flowing. The 7 rivers of Israel, including the iconic Jordan, will be flowing. Right now, they can't rent kayaks in Far Bloom because the northern Jordan River can't support kayaks.
That used to be a big deal, like the
like last year it was a big deal. It's like literally going down every year. So the rivers will be flowing, and there'll be parks and not just manicured parks, but urban nature sites. That's what we're doing in Gazelle Valley. If you haven't been to Gazelle Valley in Jerusalem, Emek Tzfayim, it's 50 acres. We're breeding gazelles to return to the wild, and it's just managed to be this incredible open nature site in the city. And the gazelles are just fenced in by a little yellow rope. They wander wherever they want, but people have to stay out of the core. Everybody thought Israelis would never learn to do that, but turns out if you just teach them a few times, they do that. It's also Israel's first leave no trace kind of park. There's no garbage cans in the park. We expect everybody to just take out whatever they bring in, and
it's working.
It works with guides and volunteers who merge, but it's been a few years now, so yes, it's much better than it used to be.
Okay, well, that's great, Jay. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure talking to you, Esti. I hope to see you in Baltimore sometime, and if you're in Israel, really look us up.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be there next summer. So,
and that's true for any of your listeners too. We can show you really interesting behind the scenes nature sites, bird ringing, and very, very interesting stuff. So.
Is there a website they can visit or something on social media?
natureisrael.org, and in Hebrew, for Hebrew speakers, it's teva.org.il. But yeah, there's our offerings are on there, and information about us and how to contact us. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, Jay, and go to the website, everybody, and visit Israel. Visit the nature. I think it's important and it's beautiful. You'll enjoy it. All right. Thank you all for listening. Until next time.